Welcome, everyone, to the Captive Audience. It is the 18th of August. We are much of the way through the dog days, and very importantly, only 11 days away from the drama that will be the special session that's likely to last about one day, unless it goes terribly wrong for the Democrats, in which case they might all be bypassing the Labor Day picnics to enjoy passing whatever Tina Kotek and Rob Wagner and Julie Fahey are ordering everybody to pass, which is how democracy works, you see. Anyway, I'm Kevin Hoare, and I am very fortunate here to have with us one of our regular guests that comes on and kind of gives us the lowdown on what's happening, often with the crazy stuff out of Salem, sometimes comparing what's happening at the national level with the state, as well as corruption and all of the insider stuff that, frankly, the regular media doesn't really get around to reporting until, I don't know, until somebody's under federal investigation or something like that. But we have with us here Jeff Eager, former mayor of Bend, an attorney, an investigative reporter, and the prime force behind Oregon Roundup, which you can find at OregonRoundup.substack.com, where you can read many of these fantastic articles he does. Also, you can follow his podcast, Oregon Roundup. And off the top of my head, I can't remember your Twitter feed. That's what I was trying to look up. But what is that one, Jeff?
It's Jeff underscore Eager. So it's just like my name looks on the screen right now, just an underscore between the F and the E.
Perfect, because that is where folks can go and follow what you're doing. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to be back.
So it seems like we actually have to do these shows often enough, or we would have too many things to cover that are just too juicy. And this is no exception this time. What we have now is just the things that have gone down in the months since we last talked. I think the One Big Beautiful Bill passed. And then Democrats promptly losing their minds over how it's apparently going to be devastating to Oregon because they haven't been. And every last bit of spending that they have is absolutely vital. So therefore, this is Donald Trump destroying Oregon, which apparently they hadn't done already. But we're going to talk about some evidence that maybe they already have. And also the I think, really provocative topic of what they are doing to play games with the people here in Oregon while all this is going on, and maybe what Oregonians are deciding themselves. What are they deciding? What's the verdict here in Oregon on what people think of the state, often measured by whether they're moving here or not, and perhaps just how expensive it is and what other places in the country are saying in their ratings. Where should they go? Well, why don't we start off at the top here, because the special session is what we talked about last time. And I think we talked about what was likely to happen with the state legislative session. And of course, did it surprise you how it ended?
Yes, it did, in the sense that the Democrats didn't get what they wanted. I thought that they would they'd find a way to get their tax hike, and so I was, as someone who didn't like the tax hike, I was pleasantly surprised that they weren't able to get it passed.
Well, and they hold all the cards. I mean, we've seen this movie before, and the way it ended every other time was they still find a way to strong arm something through. And now that they have even more leverage over the walkout stuff, more than they used to, right?
Yeah.
Why didn't they pull it off? And there is some fallout from this. The special session is to fix something that they screwed up. But it wasn't because Republicans, which they tried to blame, who are in the super minority, uh, you know, confounded everything is that the Democrats clearly put themselves in a position where they needed Republicans who they did nothing but slap in the face and ignore and
Yeah.
run over the top of and
Yeah.
kill all their bills, not even let them have hearings. They're like, but now we really love you. And
Yes.
it didn't work because there were Democrats that couldn't stomach what was going on.
Yep. Yep. I think that is the degree of dissension that apparently was occurring within the Democrat caucuses in both houses of the legislature was really unusual. And like you said, that's ultimately why the thing went down, is they didn't have their own members. And I think there were a few reasons for that. One is, or at least two reasons for that. One is that gas taxes are extremely unpopular.
Yeah.
Extremely unpopular. I think what a lot of politicians don't understand is that gas taxes are politically way different than income taxes, because it's every guy and girl, every voter in the state of Oregon almost buys gasoline, and people are super attuned to the price of gasoline. And
it's very regressive. Very
and
regressive.
it's, yeah, exactly. It's regressive. It doesn't it hits the low income guys worse than the high income guys, and people just hate it. And it's cross parties, they hate it.
But I thought we were bad people for needing gasoline. So why aren't they just satisfied that we're unhappy?
Yeah, and they should be, right? Like, if the Democrats had their way, presumably we'd be paying like infinite dollars for gas, right?
Like in Europe.
Because driving cars is destroying the planet, and so why should they? Yeah, they should tax. Put a 3 million% tax on gasoline in Oregon. Absolutely.
Well, so then what transpired? What was the threat? And then what transpired right after the session happened is that Governor Kotek, who didn't say she was going to have a special session right away, immediately announced that they're going to have almost 500 layoffs, and they would be of that this would really hurt, that it would be real workers who, by the way, are members of the public employee unions that Democrats apparently care about the most, and that they wouldn't be able to do things like fill potholes, complete road construction, plow snow later.
Yeah.
And that it was completely unavoidable. And I heard from no less than 6 state legislators on the Republican side on this show that was false, because they gave them a proposal that said, if you do this, you don't have to raise taxes and you don't have to cut any jobs, which I think they should cut some jobs, not the ones they're cutting. I think they should get rid of the bureaucratic overhead and the $28 million DEI department in ODOT. But so she played this game, and I think in an article that you wrote back at the end of July, she used it as a cudgel.
Yeah. So what I did is I went back and I watched her testimony in front of the House Rules Committee at the very end of the special session. So this was when they...
Thank you for doing that, by the way. I know it's not easy.
It was unpleasant, but it was after they pulled their big bill, because their big bill wasn't going to get the votes. And they had retrenched, and they had said, okay, well, we're going to do like a 3-cent a gallon gas tax, some other stuff, just to prevent layoffs, right? So she goes to the Rules Committee and testifies and says, if you don't vote for this bill tonight, I'm going to have to cut. I think the number she used at that point was 600.
Yeah.
Like, tomorrow, I am starting the process of laying off 600 ODOT employees. Well, the bill didn't pass. And she didn't do the layoffs. She didn't even start the process of maybe laying them off for a couple of weeks. And then no one's been laid off. No one. And then she says that, and then when she announces a special session, she says again, if we don't do our job and hike gas taxes by 6 cents a gallon, and increase the tax on employment to pay for light rail and buses, I'm gonna have to lay off 500 people, right? And so I saw that and I was like, wait a second, she's already said this. She already, like, she bluffed once, well, more than once with it, because they were talking about layoffs during the whole debate about the big bill as well. But she clearly was using it as a bluff to the Rules Committee. I think there's every chance she's using it completely as a bluff right now, because who in the state less wants to lay off state workers than Tina Kotek? Tina Kotek does not want to lay off state workers. I mean, that's her bread and butter, as you said, via the Public Employee Union. So I think there's every chance that even if the bill goes down in this one day maybe session, wouldn't surprise me if there's another reason why there's not layoffs.
Yeah, and then I wouldn't be surprised if there's yet another special session that they'll call, because they're just not gonna let go of this. They're not. And what's funny is the foremost opponent, because when you read these uncritical presentations like on OPB and the Oregonian and what is this, Central Oregon Daily, which is kind of left leaning, right? They just present this as, well, here's what has to be done in order to make up for the $530 million shortfall. They don't talk about anything that's being spent that shouldn't be spent, or priorities for transportation that match what people really want. And by the way, the gas tax is doubly bad because it's not a percentage. It is a cent amount. So even if the price of gas goes down, the amount of money that they get doesn't. So if it goes down to $2.50 a gallon, you're still going to pay 46 cents a gallon in total gas taxes, and you're going to be like, why isn't this going down more? I've heard people saying that lately. But then they just have this uncritical thing where they just present it, and then there was this complete, farce of them pretending they were going to make cuts. But Senator Meek, a Democrat who won his race by, I think it was less than 1,000 votes in 2020. Was that 2024?
I think 22 is when
maybe it was 22. And well, that might be why he's paying such close attention to it, because if he is up in 2026, that would explain a lot of his heartburn.
Right.
And he is not only the one who kind of blocked it in the Senate, but the Senate President, Rob Wagner, removed him from a committee, replaced Senator Meek with himself, Rob Wagner, voted it out of committee, only to have it go down in flames like it did. And that bill, if there's a one big beautiful bill at the federal level, this is the one big ugly bill that just got uglier and uglier. And then by the end, it was the redheaded stepchild, and nobody wanted it, not even the Democrats. And he is actually now, because he's like a key vote, they need him, because if the Democrats stick together, they can pass whatever they want, right? He is calling on Rob Wagner to resign as Senate president. When somebody in your caucus calls on you to resign from something, and the Willamette Week reports it, not some right-wing kooks,
right.
This is real, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is real. I think Senator Meek did say he plans to vote for the 6-cent increase and the other stuff in the Labor Day session. But yes, he that whole thing, the way that went down with removing Meek from the committee because he was tepid and planning to vote no on the bill, it was kind of shocking. And I know I've talked to some former and current legislators about that, and what I understand is that typically when that happens, and the Democrats have done this over the years, when that happens, typically the president of the Senate or the Speaker of the House does it quietly, right? Like they talk to the member first, and it's kind of a like it's an arranged thing. Egos are protected to the extent that they can be protected under those circumstances.
Yeah.
This one did not go well, apparently. And as you mentioned, Meek is now calling for Wagner to step down. It wouldn't surprise me. It does surprise me a little bit that neither Fahey nor Wagner lost their jobs over the way that the last session went.
Yeah.
Because that just was not good, and I'm sure that Kotek gave them a talking to, especially once she felt like she had to intervene at the very end, like she
And
did.
she served as speaker for 10 years. So
Yeah.
she's somebody who I think in some respects figures she knows what their job should be and how they should do it.
Exactly. I'm sure. I'm sure.
And Peter Courtney, I mean, I don't think either one of the current holders can look forward to as lengthy a tenure as Kotek and Peter Courtney by any stretch of the imagination, based on their performance in just one session where they held all the cards.
Yep. Yep. Super majorities. I think they will be in deep trouble immediately if they don't get a bill through in the special session coming up. I think that's
fair to say.
That's pretty clear. Although I suspect that at this point, Kotek has an iron grip on that process. I understand she's personally involved in calling legislators, trying to whip votes and all that stuff. So it's kind of her show. But if it fails, I wouldn't be surprised if one of Fahey or Wagner or both lose their gigs.
Well, and that would have, even then, it still would have been because the bill was brought really late. It wasn't brought until very late in the process, like in June. But I think one of the reasons why Fahey and Wagner didn't have to fall on their swords is because the person who was really at fault ultimately wasn't that Tina Kotek, who played hands off and everything until late in the process and then rushed in to sort of trying to strong arm everybody. She's the one who thought, I'll just be gubernatorial and you guys take all the hard, hits. And then two incompetent people are running their caucuses, and actually Kotek should have known that.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that was Kotek trying to stay away from the gas tax issue, because, like I said, it is a politically potent issue, and even Democrats are kind of scared of it because they can't billionaire their way through it, right? Because everyone pays gas taxes. So she probably preferred to get through the session without having her fingerprints all over this gas tax and other ridiculous tax hike bill that she could be hit with next year when she's running for reelection.
Yeah, all the big fees and all that stuff. Yeah. Well, so I don't think they're going to see Republicans being more accommodative this time around, because there were a couple of Republicans that were talking with them in the House, and I just don't think that's going to happen. One of them, I think, has even said, shouldn't have done that. That all looks bad now, right? Because why would you interrupt the Democrats when they're, digging a hole for themselves?
It's a good question. I did see, so State Rep Cyrus Javadi from Tillamook, he's a Republican. He writes a Substack, and I receive it. And I happened to read this one, and he said that he was supportive of the 6-cent gas tax increase. I don't think he said what he was going to vote on the bill, but at least he was in that Substack post that he wrote supportive of a 6-cent gas tax increase. So,
well, they're not going to get an I-5 Rose Quarter thing anymore because they lost the federal funding, right? Yeah. After screwing around for years and saying, well, we had $450 million from the Biden administration. Yeah, you had 4 years to do something with it too. and you
Mhm.
didn't do anything. In fact, they've been working on this since 2017 when they got the first chunk of money for that. So I think it's going to be great reminding voters just how long they screwed around and made this incredibly complex thing. Somebody told me that that idea of putting that cover over the highway and building on top of it, like a community, that that has been around for even longer than going back to 2017. And it's a dumb idea to make something that complex and that expensive when it's so badly needed.
Mhm.
And now they, instead of $450 million, I think they're only standing to get 50 million. Which, and then they've got the there's a bridge in Clackamas that has to be addressed too, and then all the other stuff that people thought ODOT was doing. I know that in some places they're spending a huge amount of money cleaning up garbage from homeless people,
Oh yeah.
and graffiti.
Mhm.
And but this is like they've finally been hoist on their own petard. And I know that some Republicans were supportive of having some kind of fee or road tax system for electric vehicles,
Mhm.
which, you know, is kind of reasonable actually because they're pretty heavy, and they do wear the road more than a regular gas vehicle. But they also have had this pristine special status, which maybe Democrats don't feel that way so much anymore now that they hate Elon Musk so much. I don't know. That's the best electric vehicle that anyone can really afford, and
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going to go. So, what's your bet that we're going to see? Because we're 11 days away, and
You
it's
know, I think honestly, I think they'll get something passed. I hate to say that because I think it's a bad idea, but I think Kotek needs it, and there's a lot of stuff she can do to get there, and so I think at the end of the day, maybe it's less than 6 cents. Maybe it gets whittled down a little bit more, but I think they will end up passing something.
but the big dream of completely reforming how transportation is funded, that's probably dead.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, you can Kotek in the fallout from the last session was saying, well, this is what we're going to do next is just a band aid, and we still need to revisit this whole thing. I think that what Democrats have found out is that um, no one trusts them to do that kind of thing, right? Like there to me, it's it's like our state can't do really simple stuff. Our state government cannot do really simple stuff. It messes most everything up that it touches to a just spectacular degree.
Yeah, to
And
something beyond imagining.
and so now they're going to implement this whole new scheme to remake the way we fund transportation. No, I mean, in that that's like, and that's where I think you get maybe some of the more moderate Dems were tepid about the bill and it ultimately forced its death. Um, there's there's a lot of I think there's probably a lot of quiet Democrat voters and certainly a lot of middle of the road NAV type folks who 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 don't trust who don't trust the ability of their own elected Democrats to run the state competently. And as long as the bill is being footed by billionaires in their mind, the rich,
Right.
then they're fine. Like, who cares? Like, let them do their bad, like, just make a total mess of stuff. But when they're paying for it, um, they maybe they they think a little harder about that.
So the juice wasn't worth the squeeze for some Democrats, and that's where they're at now.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect lead in, by the way, to this next section of topics, which is it's kind of turned into the Democrats have decided to go back to replacing to blaming everything that they're failing at on Donald Trump because he's president and he's passed a bill. And now they say the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And the Democrats are digging in their heels. One of the things they're digging in their heels on is being a sanctuary state. And they actually stand to lose a fair amount of money. They've already lost, I guess, $15 million in grants because of this. And that's probably just the beginning because there's a Tuesday deadline tomorrow that's been issued by the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. Here's what they sent this letter to Governor Kotek, warning them to stop impeding law enforcement efforts over arresting illegal migrants. And as we know, the primary focus of what they're doing is arresting the worst of the worst first and getting them out of here. Democrats don't make a distinction. They act like that the most heinous criminal is actually just almost like a citizen here and deserves 10 appeals and all kinds of clemencies and all that stuff. But the letter said, you are hereby notified that your jurisdiction has been identified as one that engages in sanctuary policies and practices that thwart federal immigration enforcement to the detriment of the interests of the United States. This ends now. By Tuesday, August 19th, 2025, please submit a response to this letter that confirms your commitment to complying with federal law and identifies the immediate initiatives you are taking to eliminate laws, policies, and practices that impede federal law enforcement. For too long, so-called sanctuary jurisdiction policies have undermined the necessary cooperation and obstructed federal law enforcement, giving aliens cover to perpetuate crimes in our communities and evade the immigration consequences that federal law requires. I went to a Democrat town hall, I think it was about 6 weeks ago, and everybody there, which it was just a cheerleading exercise for the Democrats. They were from Indivisible was the group that a lot of them were from, and they were elderly white people foaming at the mouth at how angry they were that apparently these reports, which apparently have been debunked almost entirely, that unmarked vans full of masked TSA people have been kidnapping innocent dishwashers off the street and deporting them. This could actually have a tremendous effect on the state because actually, I don't even think Tina Kotek can pull this off if she wanted to, right?
Yeah, I think I don't know the legal stuff about. I mean, Bondi's assertion that sanctuary laws are illegal federally. I don't know if that's true or not, but they are. I mean, which isn't to say that sanctuary laws aren't a terrible idea, which they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the state of Oregon in numerous respects kind of operates as though it's not part of the United States in the sense of like the degree to which our state government just blatantly discriminates against people based on race. You can't do that under federal law, and they just do it until they get sued and they're forced to stop that particular instance. And this is kind of another area where we're gonna welcome, not just allow, but welcome people who have broken federal law to be in this country. Like that's weird. I think that's weird. And it relates to, maybe we'll get into this at some point, the that thing with the Venezuelan gang members living in Lake Oswego, illegal immigrants. Yeah, bad.
I want to talk about that here in a second because that's tied to another issue of money that Oregon's going to lose that I wanted to mention because it's actually two issues wrapped into one, isn't it? But so I think what they do is they ignore detainers. They say you have to issue a warrant for an arrest, which is actually not how capturing illegal alien criminals works. It's like
Mhm.
the federal government says they have to leave, and
Mhm.
so the question would be, what do they do to actively subvert that effort? I know that the state tries to, out of interest of privacy for the rapists and murderers that were allowed into the country to do what they want, um, that they do not allow the federal government to know when someone
Right.
has
Right.
come to grips with local law enforcement or where that person is.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it does seem like they might be trying to define the line with this effort. Like,
Yeah.
where are you
Yeah.
actively
Yep.
impeding versus actually just not volunteering information that you're not obligated to provide?
Yep. Yep. I think that's probably what they're doing is trying to clarify all this, and they. But yeah, no, I mean and I think if you were to poll Oregon, like if you just polled Oregon, should people who are in Oregon with in violation of federal immigration law, should they be deported? Period. Like that's the question. I mean, maybe I don't think I've seen that pulled in or just Oregon numbers, but it wouldn't surprise me if the number of Oregonians who support that premise is pretty darn high and maybe even a majority. Um,
Well, and even higher if they have actually committed a
well,
criminal
yeah, if you put the
offense.
criminal stuff in, then it's going to be 100%. So yes, I mean to the degree that the detainer stuff is only dealing with people who obviously have been engaged in the criminal justice program system one way or another. Yeah.
Well, and then there's one other group that's increasing as the days go by, and it is the group that filed what turned out to be specious um, claims of a refugee status or asylum, right? And it has to go through this whole process and be adjudicated nationwide. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 million have already lost their cases and been ordered deported uh, by a federal immigration judge. Now, sometimes it's because those people just didn't show up for the hearing, and then they lose. Other times they showed up and they lost. But
Yeah.
in the end, their claim didn't meet the legal standard, and so they don't belong here. And I wonder what the poll would say if people were supplied that little ditty. It won't be
Yeah.
as high as the criminal, but it's going to
Right.
be,
Right. Right. Yeah, it could be, and it's just the amount of lawlessness that attended everything regarding immigration in this country for a long time, but especially bad under the Biden administration. It's just ridiculous that our country puts up with just lawlessness, just like accept it as something that's going to happen. If people want to let more people in the country, then change the law to let more people in the country. But our elected representatives have enacted laws that restrict immigration, and it's just like the executive branch has just completely ignored those laws. It's
yeah, during the Biden administration, that's
bizarre.
exactly what happened. And if they wanted to change the law, we've got plenty of Democrats coming from Oregon who could go and offer some sort of, deal to Republicans and say, look, we want to make a deal because we want to keep some of these people here to go, I don't know, like pick grapes or, um, you know, pick marijuana.
That's what they were doing down in California, right? They had
Exactly.
kids picking the marijuana. Yeah.
Well, and so, or work, as I've heard, they actually are working construction here. There's some pretty good, high paying jobs, wildfire fighting, etc. But this is what Democrats could do. They don't do it because they're just trying to gum up the works. And we do know, and this is an issue now, we do know that it was one of their goals to see if they couldn't swell the numbers in the census to get apportionment to work to their advantage. And then down the line, if these people become citizens, they become, they go from undocumented workers to undocumented Democrats in
Yeah.
a, you know, and who knows, maybe they'll vote before they're citizens. But we know they're on the rolls. We already got that.
Yep.
But this is something that they're willing to go to the mat for, and now they're going to find out just how much it's going to cost them to stick to this, because then they may actually have to go and start, I don't know, finding other taxes to increase or cut programs for people who are citizens who aren't getting funds because they're going to spend it on illegal immigrants, and it's a
Yep.
lot of money. It's
Oh,
a
it
lot of
is.
money.
It is. It is. And they don't. I don't. I think yeah. Democrats, even in states like Oregon, um, I don't think Democrats know how much money is spent on that. I don't know. I couldn't give you the figure off the top of my head. How
Well, they
much
try to make it.
Oregon?
They try to make it hard to find out,
Yeah.
because there's like, well, we can't ask that question, so we can't tell you how many people are getting Medicaid and are not citizens. Well,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really high number, and I think there'd be a lot of people in Oregon that aren't just Republicans that would be pretty alarmed by whatever that number is.
so the other story that ties in with this is Medicaid. And the Democrats are claiming right now the figure that they've given is $15 billion will be lost, primarily due to what's going to happen to Medicaid. I think it's 11 billion of the 15 billion between now and like 2031 or 2030 or something like that. The state will lose. I think it's only $500 million in the next biennium. But then when you look at what they actually are, the reasons why there's going to be less money coming in, you have to ask why Oregon wants to pay for people who can't meet the test of uh, actively seeking work when they're capable of working.
Yeah.
And that is the thing, is like, this is the main reason why they're losing those funds. There was one other reason that they mentioned, and this ties back to something you said a little while ago. Apparently this there's a greater burden for them to verify whether or not people are working in order to continue receiving these Medicaid funds. And by the way, working doesn't even mean a paid job. It can mean volunteer hours, like 20 hours a week of volunteering. You don't even have to work to continue receiving these benefits. And they think that they're going to have 1 to 200,000 people. They didn't say citizens. They said people will lose their health care benefits paid for courtesy of Medicaid. And also now they're going to have to verify every 6 months if whether or not these folks still qualify, which they say is very, very hard. And I listened to an OPB report just about a couple hours ago where they said, yes, this is going to be difficult because it'll involve paying hundreds of people to go and look at whether or not people are still verified, as we spend billions on paying out these benefits to folks that may not be qualified as a result, or maybe shouldn't be qualified because they won't verify or even bother to find a job. And we know that there's a bunch of people who are capable of working. They have the statistics. So this is a big lie, isn't it? This is Medicaid's out of money.
Yeah, I mean it's ridiculous. The idea that there are people on Medicaid in Oregon who are physically capable of working and they won't, or at least our governor says they shouldn't, is absurd. Like, is our goal to provide medical insurance for these folks forever, or is it to help them get moved on to something else where they're not being provided those benefits anymore? And Oregon suffers the overarching problem with Oregon public policy, not to nerd out too much, is that we encourage behavior that is bad and we discourage in behavior that is good. We encourage bad behavior, not working, sitting around the house, just being on government assistance your whole life. Very much Oregon encourages that. And that's not to say there aren't people that need help, fine, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the way that Oregon like so desperately wants to help people that it ends up giving people an incentive to need help or to stay in a position of needing help, and
Forever.
that's and we encourage that kind of behavior. And then on the other side, on the tax end of things, we just discourage anyone who works hard, makes good money, or works hard, makes any money, and just make it just ungodly expensive to work and be productive. What are we talking about doing in this transportation bill? Is adding a like 0.1 cent or something to the payroll tax, statewide payroll tax, so that we are taxing employment, making employment more expensive, so that we can pay for trains and buses. That why are we adding to the disincentive to work? Because that's what a payroll tax is. It's a disincentive to work. It's a disincentive to employ people. Why are we increasing the cost of doing that to pay for buses? And
Which people aren't riding.
Yes, that are often empty. Exactly. It's just insane. So this Medicaid thing I view through that lens. It's like, yeah, Oregon should welcome attempts to ensure that people who are able-bodied on Medicaid work or volunteer or do the other stuff that you can do to pass that test. It's gross that Kotek reacted in the way she did.
Well, and the country has decided through its elected representatives in the 2024 election that they don't want to pay for Oregon's decision to go and pay for stuff like that anymore. So it means that when they lose the money, they're actually losing it for the right reason, because Oregon shouldn't be spending that money in many cases. Also, apparently, I forgot to mention that the SNAP benefits, that's another thing they said they're going to lose money on. That's the food program to pay, especially for kids. But in this case, they're going to introduce work requirements for people that do receive those benefits. And they're not going to pay for 100% off the bat. They're going to pay for 85% now only. And what that's done is that made its skin in the game. And is one of my favorite quote. I have a couple of top quotes from Margaret Thatcher. One of them is, socialism's great until you run out of other people's money.
Yeah.
And this is where Oregon actually can't go and just spend someone else's money on paying for this anymore. And they're whining and claiming that they're literally scaring everyone who has legitimate reasons for having some of these benefits, as well as people on Social Security and Medicare. They don't make any distinction. They just say it's all being cut. And they want to keep the gravy train going. I think this is what should happen. This is actually, all the financial pressures are going to build on these folks. They're all going to blame Trump. But I actually don't think that the people are going to blame Trump when they find out that we're paying for people who could work and refuse. And either the state's too incompetent. You mentioned how they're terrible at like doing administration, right? So it's in part incompetence, like they can't figure out how to do a rigorous verification procedure to save billions.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't even dispense unemployment benefits effectively, or build a computer system that could have you sign up for Obamacare. They couldn't do it. They're just incapable of doing these things, which are not like, there's no Republican or Democrat computers. There's no Republican or Democrat unemployment benefits. It is just, they can't do it. And then they want to pay for people that could well actually go out. And I've heard from so many businesses that they can't find people. Mm-hmm. And they know there are people just sitting at home collecting money and playing Xbox that could work for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, it does work for them, right? Like that's the Medicare, or not Medicare, welfare reform that Clinton did under pressure from Newt and the Republicans in Congress, mm-hmm. Was an unmitigated success.
Yep.
In reforming that system and getting people off of welfare and into productive jobs. And we know that people that are working productively are much happier people, much more mentally stable. The drug use is lower. All the stuff that Oregon suffers from is, or a lot of the stuff Oregon suffers from, is that we do everything we can from a public policy standpoint to encourage people not to work. And this is what we get.
Well, and by the way, those people will become taxpayers. That you would think that would actually get the attention of the Democrats, but they have little regard for the economy. But this is where we tie the illegal immigrant sanctuary city thing together with the Medicaid. Well, we're running out of money and everything we're spending money on is absolutely necessary. And then you wrote a story that posted yesterday about a fantastic combination of these two issues, and it's jaw-dropping. Why don't you go ahead and introduce it, because it's so good. I want to give you the entire opportunity to just really roll it out here for folks.
Okay. So, sorry. In January of 2025, this woman comes out of her apartment near Seattle or in Seattle and is accosted by, I think, a group of 4 Hispanic men. She herself is Hispanic, and forced into her car. And then they take her outside of Seattle up into the mountains. They want to get her PIN number so they can use her debit card to withdraw money from her account. She wouldn't give it to them. They used a power drill to actually drill into her hand to force her to give them the PIN number. At some point, they shot her and thought she was going to die or was dead, left her alongside the highway out in the middle of nowhere, and then leave, and then use her debit card again. Rob her of, she was carrying a bunch of gold in her purse, so they robbed her too. So anyway, that happens in January. It turns out that later on, one of the guys that was participating in that was this guy with the last name of Sanabria Ojeda, I think is the way it would be pronounced. And he was living in a house in Lake Oswego, Oregon, it turns out. And the people running that house in Lake Oswego, Oregon, was this company called Uplifting Journey LLC out of Portland that was reimbursed over the course of less than a year $2.3 million by the state of Oregon in Medicaid funds.
Medicaid.
For allegedly providing drug counseling services. Now, the gentleman, Sanabria Ojeda, King County prosecutors, so these are Seattle prosecutors, these are not right-wingers.
No.
They allege that this guy that was in the Lake Oswego house participated in the drilling, that he is a member of the Tren de Aragua Venezuelan drug gang, and he was living in this house in Lake Oswego where the people who ran the house were getting paid millions of dollars by the state of Oregon in Medicaid reimbursements. I think that's the summary of the story, but it is the wildest. I think it's the wildest thing I've covered in years of doing this in Oregon, which is saying something. I've written about some really weird stuff.
Yep.
But so it gets even weirder. The people, this Uplifting Journey LLC that's gotten $2.3 million from the state. One of the owners of it was founded by 2 people. One of the owners is this guy that goes by the name of Julius Maximo.
Almost sounds fake.
If you go look at his social media stuff, it's like the type of pictures that would accompany, "Hi, I'm like the king of Ghana or whatever, and you need to send me such and such." It's like it looks made up.
Like
and
the
these pictures of
Nigerian stuff that you
the
get.
yes, like the
Yeah, yeah.
Nigerian stuff, and it's pictures of him, I think, in Africa. He is a black man, and anyway, none of it looks legit to me. I can't prove that it's Medicaid fraud yet, but it looks suspicious as hell, and it's just a wild story.
And so these guys are associated with this Uplifting Journey LLC that was running, getting $2.3 million in Medicaid funds from the state of Oregon to rehabilitate people at a house that was also, one of its occupants was this uh, alleged attempted murderer and member of a human and drug trafficking Venezuelan gang, Tren de Agua, who was actually involved, according to the Seattle authorities, in this really awful robbery and attempted murder. And these are the state of Oregon, it's the same people that say that they just don't have the resources and time to scrutinize what's being done with Medicaid funds. And then, of course, we're talking about people who I'm sure their citizenship might be questionable, or certainly when you're involved with a human and drug trafficking gang that has been classified by the federal government as a terrorist organization. I wonder if they actually maybe had an encounter with this guy and made sure the feds couldn't find out he was here. Why not? I mean, would you be surprised if that became part of this story in the near future?
What wouldn't surprise me, and I don't know this, so I'm not reporting it. What wouldn't surprise me is if that whole Uplifting Journey and the house in Lake Oswego was operated as a front by Tren de Aragua.
Yeah.
And that it was actually Tren de Aragua committing Medicaid fraud in Oregon.
Yeah.
Because no one in Oregon pays attention to that stuff. And illegal immigrants are welcomed here, frankly. I mean, I think that's probably what's going on, but I'm not sure. I can't say for sure yet.
So there was a question: is this guy still out and about?
No, he's in jail or he was. Last I knew, he was in jail up in King County, Washington. The feds did put a detainer. We were talking about detainer. A detainer on him because they want to deport him if he is released by King County. But I do not believe he's free. He's either in federal or Washington custody, I think.
I imagine he's on ICE's radar now.
I think so.
Yeah. So all of the stuff that we've talked about just illustrates what is the nuttiness of the people running the state and how wrong their policies are. And it's not just failing to accomplish things with funds or giving money to people who shouldn't be receiving it, who are otherwise innocent. They fund corruption and they fund failure. They fund things that make things worse. And they put on a grin and say, we have to keep doing all this stuff. And then I see this story, and this is sort of our, last phase here of the show, which is kind of a group of topics. This one, it is too hot and too expensive. Oregonians sweat as data centers gorge on cheap power. Oregonians are paying 4 times more for power as PGE gives it at a discounted rate to the data centers. And he goes to detail this in this article, and it's just like, so it's expensive to live here in Oregon, and everybody would agree that one of the major expenses is power. And then I would add to this story the fact that this isn't the only thing that's got people pissed off. We just described a bunch of things that aren't working about the state, but there's all these problems they aren't fixing about the cost of housing, the traffic, We were joking about 217 and how they, widened half of it. The other half is where the traffic jam is going to be. I know that. And it turns out that Oregon is actually one of the worst states to move to, according to an analysis by Consumer Affairs. They ranked Oregon the fourth worst state to move to in 2025, which is down from its 2024 rating of seventh worst, which doesn't surprise me at all after what we just said. We only California, Louisiana, and New Mexico are below us. And notably, some of the states that I keep hearing people moving to, such as Utah and Idaho, are at the top of the list of places to live, according to this rating. And I'm just like, this problem is starting to snowball. Like every day I hear people that are saying, that's it, I'm done, I'm out. One of the people that does Captive Audience, Sunny Danforth, she moved to Florida. Last week I had on one of our original founders of the show, Jeff Reynolds. He moved to Florida 3 years ago. This is happening, and now it's sort of like a slide is starting to happen economically because companies are leaving or cutting back. And you actually had a Substack on Oregon Roundup by one of your contributors that talked about the problem of reversing Oregon's economic slide. Representative Reschke just detailed all the companies that are moving out and laying off, and then the missed opportunities. And it is unbelievable how long this list is. There's at least 15 companies where they could have gotten more expansion and investment. I'll just name some of them: Apple, TSMC, which is the Taiwan semiconductor company, NVIDIA, Intel, and Micron, of course, went to Arizona, Ohio, and Idaho, respectively. Hyundai, they could have gotten Hyundai to be doing some of their production here. Honda, Nissan, Eli Lilly, Merck, Abbott Laboratories, and GE Appliances all missed opportunities. And it's kind of turning into a doom loop where the costs of being here are going up and what we're getting is going down. And now the economy that's supposed to pay for it all is atrophying. I know that's a lot to throw at you in one go, but it's just like, and then I read that we're paying 4 times more than the data centers are for our electricity.
Yeah, it's it is crazy, and we're I think a lot of us have, for a lot people who have been around Oregon for a while and paying attention to Oregon politics, know that a lot of us have been saying for a long time that what's happening right now is going to be the end result of all these liberal economic policies, right? We've been saying that for a long time, and Oregon kept doing okay for the most part, right? Like certainly missed opportunities, could have been doing a heck of a lot better, but everything was up and to the right in terms of population. The economy was relatively doing okay. But I think what happened is what's different this time now, and why it's all coming true right now, is because of 2 things primarily. One is that we got expensive. Like we got we became an expensive place to move.
Yeah.
Like it's happened here in Bend. We get, for a long time, forever, we've gotten these California folks coming up here to live, and people from Portland, Seattle, whatever, from all over the place. But what's happened is the housing here has gotten so expensive that we're like the people that used to come to Bend are now going to, Utah or other places that aren't as expensive as Bend. We still get people, or Idaho, and there's plenty of places that are less expensive than Bend. So the people we get here tend to be very, very well off because they can afford to be here, and then vote like Californians. But the other thing that's happened is that the government has just gotten so extreme. The policies, they've been liberal for a long time, but kind of a little bit more constrained. And now we're just in total la la land in terms of what our state and local governments try to do to business and private property and just all the stuff you need to make an economy go and make it affordable to live in a place. They've just dismantled the whole thing, and that's why we're in this doom loop now that we're in, and things can change for sure, and I hope it does.
Yeah.
But one thing that would make it much more likely to improve would be if the state stopped trying to raise taxes, if it stopped trying to regulate what businesses are doing to the hilt and in all circumstances, everywhere, regardless of the benefit of the regulation, that would make it a lot more likely that we could pull out of this thing.
And it could change quickly if the right policies were being pursued, but we're also competing with other states that are doing it right at the same time that the federal government's actually trying to make things better for everybody in the country. And then Oregon's just doubling down on the wrong decisions. And, when Dutch Brothers has to leave in order to feel like they can thrive as a coffee company, how hard would it have been for Tina Kotek to really pull out all the stops and say, I need to meet with the Dutch Brothers CEO. I heard you guys are thinking on leaving. I'm going to go and put a package through in the legislature that's going to start addressing the things that you're concerned about. And by the way, I want you to call me if there's a problem and you guys can't seem to get it solved. And I don't think that actually even happens.
I think having Kotek talk to a business person might not be the best way to keep them in Oregon.
Yeah, what does she know about business? Exactly.
She does. Like, I laughed about that when she announced recently that she was going to go personally lobby businesses to stay in Portland and come to Portland. She made this big thing, like she was going to personally meet with these people and talk them into investing in Oregon. I was like, that's not going to work. Like that is not going to work.
Joe Biden personally broker a peace agreement all by himself when he was president.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen either, huh?
No. Business people don't want to see someone like Tina Kotek coming in to tell them why they should come to Oregon.
Well, so here's one of the consequences. California already experienced this, and it's very common, but it didn't happen to Oregon. It was the opposite up until recently. Oregon's current trend is that they stand to lose a congressional seat in 2030. In other words, not keep the one that they gained for the first time in, I think it was 40 or 50 years, which is the 6th district, but in fact lose that district in the next census. And I can't believe it's going to also be very good if illegal immigrants aren't counted as for the reapportionment. So despite the fact that we're a sanctuary destination for people to go to, but it's people are voting with their feet and their wallets here and just saying, done with that. And I think we are both optimists and want to see it work out. That's why we do this. We try to make people aware of this stuff. But these consequences eventually become real. And if all Democrats cared about was, like they keep saying with the Texas redistricting thing, if all they care about is who controls Congress, then they should care about whether or not Oregon sends itself into a doom loop and loses a congressional seat, shouldn't they?
Yeah. I mean, you would think so. You would think so because Florida is going to get our congressional seat in all likelihood, or some Tennessee or some red state. Frankly, Texas is going to get our seat, but that would require progressives to acknowledge that their responsibility for causing bad stuff, and they can't, and they won't.
Well, voters will have to do it. That's why we keep doing what we're doing. Now, just as a final thought here, you've paid a lot of attention to some of the controversies going on. By the way, I have no idea what's happening with LaMotta at this point, other than the fact that what's her name, the former Secretary of State Shemia Fagan, apparently Biden, his administration dropped that case just in time for him to leave office.
Yep.
But I wouldn't count out somebody looking at this somewhere in Washington right now.
I hope so. I think I wrote something about how at least once, how the Trump administration should take a look at that dismissal because it happened. It happened right at the end. It happened in December of 2024. We know that Biden was doing all kinds of weird stuff they were like pardoning his son. Like he was.
Well, maybe he wasn't even doing it. That's the thing.
So there's that question. Did he really even do it? Or was this kind of like the pardons where it's just like we're gonna just flush as much of this stuff as we possibly can? And it may be that there wasn't enough to pursue charges, but I sure don't trust the Biden DOJ in December of 2024 to come to an actual legal conclusion.
Well, you did actually spot some pretty good stuff with this architect and that whole controversy, and I think it's worth mentioning. Ethics Probe is now proceeding with the Ethics Commission into this alleged architect conflict of interest that we talked about last time we were on. Just to remind folks, let's just tell people what that was briefly.
Yeah, so Oregon spends a ton of money on what it calls affordable housing. There's a committee called the Oregon Healthcare Committee. That's not the right word for it.
I'm looking for it here in the article, but yeah.
But they, it's this committee is appointed. The members of this committee are appointed by the governor. Kotek appointed this woman who is an architect to the committee back in 2023, I think. Mm-hmm. And she votes among the other committee members on approving like hundreds of millions of dollars in housing assistance.
Oh, it's the Housing Stability Council.
Housing Stability Council is the name of the council, not committee, that she's on. Thanks, Kevin. And so it turns out that some of the projects she has voted to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on are projects on which her architecture firm does work for money. This has happened with 2 or 3 projects so far. And the kind of most depressing, like everything else in Oregon, it's like depressing and kind of funny at the same time. When I reached out to the OHCS spokesperson and to this woman, Maggie Harris, I think is her name, that when I reached out to them about, hey, it looks like you voted on this stuff that you're getting paid to work on, or your firm is getting paid to work on. And they both responded with various versions of, well, the spokesperson said that this committee member recused herself on projects that she was actually working on, but not projects that she herself was not working on, which is completely irrelevant from a conflict of interest legal analysis.
Yeah.
Because where the conflict of interest gets triggered is if you or your employer benefit financially from a decision that you're making as a appointed official.
It's just absurd they even made that statement. Like,
yeah, and so when I got that, I was like, you guys are, I mean, I didn't say this to them, but you guys are way off base here. And to hear that specifically from the spokesperson for the state, So presumably, maybe the state was telling their counselors this. Anyway, so I wrote that there was a complaint filed uh, by a guy in the Portland area with the Ethics Commission against Harris. And that's when I wrote my first story. And then the just recently here, the staff at the Oregon Government Ethics Commission they basically made a bunch of findings supporting the complaint and
Yep.
supporting the likelihood that Harris broke conflict of interest laws. And then now it goes to a full
Investigatory.
investigation and an ethics committee vote.
So they voted to move the case to the investigation phase. It lasts 180 days. And then at that point, we're going to hear something at the end of it. Now, it's so funny that this is happening in parallel with the ramp up of the gubernatorial election season. And I can't believe that Kotek's going to be too happy about this, but the ad writes itself. And and this is because of the kind of work you do, which is super commendable, of exposing this and putting it out there. And I actually think that that's why we have to keep doing this, because I do think there are people that will see this and say that just can't continue. And it's happened in other places. One of these days, it's going to be the last time one of these people does this and finally loses their seat. Maybe it'll only be one straw that contributed to breaking the camel's back, but every straw counts.
Yeah.
There was one last piece of news I wanted to mention to you and see what you thought of it before we wrap up. And I know we ran a little bit long here tonight, but it was kind of a super duper show because look at all this stuff that we covered. This is Oregon, folks.
Yeah.
President Trump has vowed to lead an effort to end mail-in ballots. And as we know, he's been dismissed over and over as some sort of super fool that makes stuff up and believes in fictitious fraud. And the media just says, unfounded claims, blah, blah, blah. Yet I do not know where all the voters that the 81 million that voted for Joe Biden, that apparently couldn't muster 74 million this last time around. All these people evaporated. And there's actually no way to figure out exactly what they did. But he's like, that's it. No one in the world thinks vote by mail, or as the Democrats call it now, voting from home, meets the standard for avoiding cheating and fraud. And he points this out. It's like, yeah, it's illegal in Germany to vote by mail, for example. And they have like a 90% rate of people, adult voting age eligible people voting. And they get all their ballots in and they count them the same night. And they have 81 million people living in that country. So we can't do that in a state with 4 million people for a month. And so anyway, what are your thoughts on this? I know it's a super long shot that this could be done, and obviously state versus federal law and all that, but he's signing an executive order that's going to force the issue. Do you think we might end up being forced, like not necessarily getting rid of, being forced to scrutinize, think about, and at least curtail some of the risky, sketchy excesses of vote by mail in the state?
Yeah, it's the vote by mail thing is. I think I voted once. I think I voted the first time I voted, which would have been like in 1994, I guess. Yeah. Which was a good year for a Republican to vote for the first time.
Yeah.
And I went to the polling place, I believe, that year. And then I think that was the only time I ever voted in person in Oregon, because then the law changed and it's all it's all mail in now. I think what what I would love to see from the feds is the development of a more concise argument about why voting by mail is less secure or has actually caused problems. And I'm sure that a
Yep.
lot of your listeners probably know this stuff way better than I do.
Yep.
But
Better than me
I,
too.
I've been in, I've used to do political consulting, and I've been through like a state house district primary recount,
Yeah.
right? And I literally saw the whole process. I was sitting there while they were manually counting these ballots, and it went it went great, right? Like there were no problems. Like it gave me some faith in that system. Now, is there potential for fraud? Clearly, there is. But I think to really drive the argument, I think we probably need more data, and I know it's made more difficult because of the people that defend the like they don't even want to give information
They don't
about the
reassure us
system.
with data.
Yeah, they and this is one of the reasons to be skeptical of the system is that how much Ron Wyden loves it, right? Like they are very protective of that thing, yet very not transparent about that thing, and that's one reason to be suspicious of it.
So maybe they could be forced into a circumstance where they finally do actually have to come forward and respond to these standards that you're talking about and offer data that proves that this is a system worthy of all the trust they're giving
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I think the feds they ought to have access to at least the data where where there's a federal election occurring, and why if you can have free reign of that data, and maybe you can't, but if you can at least get some more stuff in and actually do the analysis and publicize that information. And again, maybe this has happened and I don't know, and I'd love to know it if this has actually happened. But I think to me that's where the feds could really help, rather than, because there's a lot of people who like vote by mail. I don't. I wish I could go to the poll and vote in
Yeah.
Oregon. That would be by far my preference, and I think it is likely far more secure way to do things. But there are a lot of people who like it, a lot of Republicans who like it, and so you're kind of fighting an uphill, I think, political fight by going directly at vote by mail. And we're getting a little beyond what you're talking about. Without, if I haven't heard the really strong case for why vote by mail is bad, I'm totally open to that argument. Maybe I haven't looked in the right places.
Well, I think that it probably all starts with the voter rolls, because vote by mail is only as good. Even if you're sitting there watching people recount ballots by hand and checking the accuracy, there's no way at that point that you can know that the person who cast that ballot was in fact
Right.
real in the state, the persons whose name was originally on the ballot, any of that stuff.
Right.
And so, if there's a way to start getting at sort of auditing that, I think that's where you get to the truth. And if somebody says, "Well, look, we did a perfect job and passed a truly independent audit of the voter rolls," then I think people would start to think differently about it. And
Yeah.
if it doesn't work, if it fails, and they just say, "Well, we're not changing anything," we're going to make it worse if we can, which is what they've been doing in terms of doing the stuff that makes it even sketchier that someone might be a voter. Then maybe that will start to change people's minds, because as you said, the federal elections, you can hold people to a standard nationally,
Mm-hmm.
because it's really not fair to have one state it's why it's good we have an electoral college system in some respects, so that one state can't just over cheat and outvote the rest of the states by what they
Yeah.
it is verified that they had dead people in cemeteries registered to vote in Illinois in one of the closest presidential elections,
Yeah.
and it tipped Illinois. It
Yeah.
was enough.
Yeah.
And so how do you make sure that that is impossible? I think people would actually be on board with that.
I think so too. And I used to be a lot less conspiratorial than I am now.
But you've seen too much.
I've seen too much. I mean, I was literally, when I was writing that story that I published yesterday about the drill and the Venezuelan gang members receiving drug addiction recovery money. I was literally like, how do I write this in a way that doesn't just like when I was writing the headline, I'm like, how do I do this without it seeming just completely ridiculous? Right?
Yeah,
That
like a Babylon Bee title.
Yeah, exactly. Like people think it's a joke or something. I really literally thought about that as I was doing that. And it's so yeah, I think people are capable of anything.
Well, and there's been some good comments here. Monique Despain's following us here today, and she said common sense. That's what you talk to people about. What would be a common sense thing to do? And she also mentioned earlier, by the way, that this is the same state that says they don't have the money to fight or prevent wildfires. So these can have serious consequences when they say we run out of money and they're wasting it paying for some Medicaid costs for Tren de Agua guy and his Nigerian Gambian buddies who are scamming people for a living, supposedly rehabilitating drug users. And then it's just and the economy. I mean, if you can't pay for stuff, then eventually it catches up with you and you run out of other people's money. But anyway, well, thanks for taking the time tonight. This is really great because we covered a lot of stuff. No one can say that we left anything on the table here today, but we're heading into a lot of big things for the fall and a real battle between what the people who are leading Oregon think is happening, what they want you to believe, and what's happening at the federal level and what they're doing and what maybe you should believe if you follow the facts. The battle's afoot, and people, maybe the next time we talk, we'll be talking about some of these things that have proceeded to draw the strong contrast between what people are getting in this state when they vote for the people they're voting for and what they could be getting.
Yep. That's great stuff. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks again, Jeff. And thanks to everyone for joining us here. Please go and check out Jeff on OregonRoundup.substack.com. That's OregonRoundup.substack.com. You can read all these great articles, some of which we talked about, including that latest one with the $2.3 million in Medicaid funds going to the Tren de Agua home. And then you can follow him on his X account, which isn't being blocked or suppressed anymore, which is very fortunate. It's x.com/Jeff_Eager. And share it with everyone you can. And share this show with everyone you can. And we will see you on the next episode of The Captive Audience. Tomorrow night, I will have Dave Huguenel back. He's going to talk about the national political trends and what he's seeing across campaigns across the country, in nationally and here in Oregon, since he's always had a foot here in Oregon